Call a meeting to order. Will you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing. It will be a presentation of the Batavia City School District Code of Conduct for 21-22. Mr. Scott Bishoping, Interim Superintendent.
And so the Code of Conduct has been posted. Just minor changes in dates and things like that, but otherwise we've not had anyone sign up to make any comment regarding the Code of Conduct.
Okay, everybody read theirs over and we're all still abiding by it. That's the end of the first part of the public hearing. The second part is a presentation describing the repair reserve fund for the purpose of expending funds from the reserve in the amount of between $34,999 and $147,495 for emergency repair of the Batavia Middle School elevator, Section 6-D of the General Municipal Law. Mr. Scott Rosansky, Business Administrator.
Handing out a little handout, just because we do have a few new board members and superintendents since this first went down. First page, it's dated May 10th. That was our last public hearing. The elevator in the middle school stopped working in March, and at that point in time, we anticipated the repairs to cost up to $65,000, and that's what the repair reserve approval from the board in May was for. And basically, the hydraulic cylinder had stopped working. Since then, we've had some supply chain issues, but now we're finally starting to get the elevator repaired, and the cylinder, after they removed the cylinder or piston, it was determined that there was an unforeseen condition. Some obstruction was preventing the work to continue. And so like, there's some metal that is crisscrossed, and so they can't get the new cylinder down there. And so we're kind of in an exploratory phase right now and trying to figure out what that issue is, and we have three potential solutions to rectify the situation, and that's why the range of funding request. We'll start with the recommended phase one, which would be to clean out the hole and the removal of the obstruction and spoils within the casing or the pipe, and probably have to drill through it since it's metal and such, because right now we can't unlodge it and things like that. And that's about a $35,000 estimate to do that phase. If the casing is good, then that should resolve the issue. But if the casing, at that point in time, if it's determined that casing, that works, but the casing is bad, which is technically the pipe where the cylinder sits in, then we would have to go to phase two, which is another $26,000. That phase one and two don't work. It would be re-drilling a hole, removing all the debris from the area, and furnishing and installing a C-channel hoisting beam, and that's another $86,000. So from the low end of about $35,000 to when you add it all up, it's about $147,495. So what you have before you tonight and later on in the board packet is a resolution to change the transfer from the repair reserve from 65 to 200 up to $212,000. and that would cover all three options if needed. And if not needed, we would only do what is needed. One of the most ironic things, just kind of looking at the history of this, at year end, we transferred $150,000, and the worst case scenario here would be $147,000. So we had no idea that was going to be the cost at that point in time, but it just kind of, so if it's worst case scenario, we're kind of where we were back at the end of, in May when we made that initial transfer. So the balances right now, in the repair reserve, the available balance is $234,198, and worst case scenario, we would be down to $86,703 in the repair reserve. So we'll be seeking the resolution to amend the transfer later on in the board meeting.
If I could just add that our construction manager has gotten second opinions on this, so this isn't just the one company idea, but there's really getting more than one company involved.
Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none, I need a motion to close the public hearings.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Marucci, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Regal, is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mr. Regal?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lundberg?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict?
Yes. Okay, now we're into our special meeting. Roman numeral number 7, public to be heard. We have none. We'll then go on to other presentations. Curriculum and instruction, Dr. Molly Corey, please.
Hello, everyone. I am going to pull my mask down just so you can hear me clearly. I'll put it back up when I finish. I handed out a sheet. The picture shows 1,000 words, and the great thing about this year is that it feels a lot more normal than we were a year ago. The pictures show that kids are in school all day, 5 days a week. They're doing pretty normal things. They had very neat things to open the year, and I'm hearing from Mr. Brownlee that everybody's enjoying the stadium at night. He has long hours each day for it. We started off with teachers wanting to foster a sense of belonging. It was really important to us as we welcomed kids back that we did so in a thoughtful way so that they would come to school and really feel that they wanted to be there. And the SEL teams worked together to pull that off, and I think we've had a really great start to the year. Every place is doing well with that front. We know that there will be some learning gaps from closure, so we have a good plan in place to have daily systems of supports to help catch kids up. There's some after-school opportunities. We have the SOAR funds that will help engage kids if it's an engagement issue. And we also have some plans in place to have some extended day opportunities to close more learning gaps if they exist. And in particular at the high school, some credit recovery. We want to make sure that seniors are on track to graduate on time. We will have a new thing. It hasn't started just yet. And I'll send this to you guys electronically because there's a little video. There's a new resource that we've bought into this year called Paper. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline for all students in grades 5 through 12 where they can access support. The company was founded by somebody who realized that kids who needed the extra supports often didn't have the means to hire a tutor outside of the day. And as much as we do to provide things right after the school day, often it's late at night when they want support. So this will help them. We're going to be encouraging teachers to help kids practice it. The company's claim to fame is if they have 3 positive attempts, they'll use it more often. And we wanted to give kids that lifeline when they needed it, when they're doing their homework. And what we learned from closure is it was often at a very different time than we would want to be helping them as teachers. Even though we did have teachers go on very, very late at night to help kids, we know that some were even doing things at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. So this will be an interesting resource for us. It really is a pretty low cost per student for what it allows. And if teachers partner with us, teachers don't really have to do anything except promote it. And we're encouraging them to actually watch it happen so they can see what kind of support kids will get from it. And we'll learn from it as the year goes on, but that's brand new for us. Along with that, we have teachers really digging deep into studying. It's called the science of reading. It's kind of a new buzzword, and it's really bringing to life some research on, compelling research on what it takes to learn to read. It's very complex, and even though our teachers have had a lot of training for a number of years, there's new research that's talking about the direct explicit instruction that students need with foundation skills. So the neat thing is we have teachers who are really into it. There's a Facebook page called The Science of Reading, and some people follow that and are really studying that. We've bought into a professional development called Letters Training, and we're working with our BOCES to deepen our knowledge and understanding of just how complex it is. And we hope that that will really help with closing the gaps, especially as we learn, what's holding kids back with that regard. On top of that, we had some curriculum projects this summer that we're really proud of, vertical projects where teachers came together to talk about that vertical progression, and that's going to continue into our data meetings, and we hope that we'll have some really neat student samples to help guide, are we doing what we want to do as they progress through the years. And then lastly, our instructional leadership team is taking on one area that came out from the strategic planning process. Students told us that our vocabulary instruction really isn't where we would want it to be based on the surveys that they gave us. And as we probed a little bit more, we thought this could be an area to reinvigorate. We've known for years that that's a big lever in terms of what kids need to learn, and it's an easy one that transcends all content. So our instructional leadership team will be digging into strategies that work best and thinking about it from their content lens. And we're hoping to really strengthen the departments and grade levels through vocabulary this year as our main focus. So if you haven't had a chance to get into the schools that you're assigned to, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how normal it really does look and the neat things that are happening.
Anyone have any comments? Thank you, Mrs. Corey, Dr. Corey.
Welcome.
Next item on the agenda is the superintendent update. Mr. Scott Bishop.
So, good evening, everybody. We're back, and I would have to congratulate our staff on doing a great job in terms of getting everybody in, as Dr. Corey referred to, and welcoming them back and making school life as normal as possible, given our circumstances. They've done a great job, and we certainly appreciate their efforts. Our students have been extraordinary as well, and certainly making sure that they are doing the things that they need to do, and at the same time still having the same kind of fun and enjoyable time that they typically do, playing the sports that they play, being involved in the extracurriculars that they are. One of the areas that we've been working a lot on is transportation. As you recall from the opening of the year, we typically have difficulties, or not difficulties, but some time lags as we get used to bus runs, especially from our youngest students. And this year was no different. So we had a bus or two that with new routes and things that had some difficulty individually, and you heard about many of those, and we certainly sent out information about that as well. That has settled down greatly. Our principals, Mr. Rosansky, everybody involved with STA has done a great job. STA put personnel on those buses to make sure that they were getting to the right places at the right times, and so everybody responded really well, and we were quickly, a lot quicker than when I was here the last time, we were quickly to our normal finish times for drop-offs. Not to say that we didn't have a hiccup or two in that first week, but so far, things have been much better since then. As with communication, mask wearing, mask breaks on buses, numbers of kids, those issues have arisen. We responded much with the assistance of Emily Benedict and the contract that we have with her company, helping us with communications and put some information out today. We plan to continue that. We certainly want to be proactive instead of reactive, and so our focus is going to be to continue to try to update the Q&A that you saw from earlier today, to try to get out that information as quickly as we can. Sometimes there are things that we don't think, because we live them, that they rise to the same level of urgency, but we soon find out when they do. And we want to respond and make sure everybody knows what's going on, and we've done that now, and we'll continue to do that. And then one other item, we're working on those requirements from the health department regarding testing of our staff. And as you are aware, that all of our staff needs to be tested on a weekly basis, except that they can opt out if they show proof of vaccination. And so we're preparing to be able to start that in early October. Part of the preparation process is to make sure that teachers or staff members, if they wish to, get their vaccination records on file with a nurse, so that the nurse knows who wants to opt out. And then secondly, to make sure that we have enough tests and what that burn rate will be, so we can be assured from the health department that we have the equipment, the testing equipment, to make sure we can continue that process through. So that's what we're doing over these preparatory weeks to begin in earnest in October. That's our plan. We also will need to, we're still finding out the particulars about offering parents that their children can be tested, screened on a weekly basis. We're finding out what that would mean, and what we have to offer, how we have to offer it. Again, that would adjust greatly that burn rate potentially. And finally, along the lines of testing, we have gotten a test machine from the health department that can test for symptomatic students or staff members. We haven't got the kits yet. They're still getting those, but that changes the game a bit for us, because once we get the test kits, if there are students that have symptoms during the course of a day, the nurse can test them, and if they're negative, they could potentially stay in school if the symptoms, if it's a cough and they have symptoms, but they can have a cough drop and it goes away like normal if they're negative, versus if they're positive. Obviously, the process for if we have a positive patient. Our current tests are asymptomatic people only, and so this new machine gives us a little bit of extra assistance for kids and families, staff members, especially those that have symptoms. Any questions?
I know I wrote to you, but I knew we would have this at the meeting tonight. How do we find out how our students, if they have COVID otherwise?
So we get informed by the health department.
The health
Our
department.
nurses do. We get information directly from them. They're usually in a position where they're asking for information about potential contacts. And so our principals, nurses will take a look at, with the teachers, where the student was during the course of the day, who was around them, whether those students were wearing masks, were they, in the places where they need to, obviously. And then the health department makes the determination of who, if and there are any students that need to be quarantined because of that.
And that quarantine length of time is what now?
It's 10 days
So 10
currently
days.
from the point of contact.
Okay.
So many times, by the time someone finds out, they've been home for a couple of days. By the time they get to us, make the decision, they might be 2 or 3 days into their quarantine time period already. And so we sometimes, it's rare that we have a full 10 days of quarantine just because of that.
Okay.
So that time frame there, if a child tests positive on Monday,
Yes.
health department is a couple days behind on who they're gonna quarantine. Those students could be in our buildings, correct?
Yeah, so what they would do is go back 2 days from the point that they tested positive.
So
They would check any
they're
contacts between those days.
between those days.
Right.
Okay.
So usually, they turn that around pretty quickly, that if the student tests positive on Monday, those tests, let's put it this way, they're a lot quicker than they were last year, where it sometimes took 2, 3, 4 days for there to be a positive. The other part of that is pretty much because of our protocol, very few students maybe are quarantined. It
That's
could
kind of
be-
the part I wanted to get you to
Sure.
say.
Yeah.
Because we're in the mask fold.
Exactly.
And
That's
so
one of the
that
reasons
does
for
reduce
the-
our.
Exactly.
Perfect.
There could be those students that may be around during lunch, if masks are off for more than 15 minutes and they're at 3 feet, the health department could pick the ones like in a diamond, if that's the case. But that's probably the only real time if we're following all our protocol.
With our new protocols,
Yeah.
drastically reduce the quarantines that we were last year.
Yeah, and their protocol as well. If you remember last year, they were, as soon as somebody was in a classroom for, a certain period of time, the whole class was
Yeah.
quarantined, and they found that that's not, that doesn't, there's not been that kind of spread of the virus.
Good. Thank you.
And then you gave us some information that there, during busing, that the students are 3 in a seat now, and that's because of the lack of enough buses?
Drivers.
Drivers,
Yes,
yeah.
drivers. And then you also sent to us that they could take a mask break. Now, I don't understand what it.
And part of our protocol for in the classroom,
Mhm.
as well as in other areas, is that after a period of time, the teachers can give students mask breaks. And a lot of that depends on the activity that they're involved in, the temperature, all of those sorts of things. So what we've advised in working with STA is that their drivers, especially on days like this coming Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, when it's going to be in the 80s, that it would be important for them to have some students have some relief from the masks at various times. The buses, on those days, they're warm, but the windows are typically open, and you have a lot of airflow on a bus, and that's really shown to be a positive thing in terms of reducing the spread of the virus. So ours, it's really balancing that well-being of the child. That in the case where having them wear a mask the whole bus ride might prove to be, put them in a situation where they're sweating and uncomfortable. To drop the mask for a couple of minutes would not put them in a position actually to be quarantined. And I spoke again with the health department director about that. The reality is whether it's 2 or 3 to a seat, because they're inside 3 feet, 2 to a seat, the same as 3 to a seat, and up in front and back are within 3 feet. The reality is it's just adding one more that might be quarantined, as opposed to if we were truly going to be able to distance 3 feet or more, we would end up needing 3 times as many buses to drive kids home.
So you're also, I would assume you're also indicating that if parents aren't happy with the 3 in a seat student, they could opt to take their child off that bus and get them to school on their own.
Certainly, they know that
They have that
we have that option up front. And many times they would like to, it's just because of their work situations or other, maybe lack of transportation, whatever the case might be, they're unable. And so I understand their concern. It's a matter of, again, we're balancing the idea that our families want to have our kids in school for as much time as possible with what is most prudent from a health and safety standpoint, as well as that mask break. And like I said, because of the contact time, we really tell our teachers that, especially on warm days, we want them to have frequent mask breaks.
Okay.
Did you have something, John?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go on to agenda alterations, and we do have a few. They are designated as green copies that you were given. We're adding under consent items appointments. I guess that's it. Everybody got a chance to look them over. I need a motion to accept the agenda alterations as so designated. Motion made by Mrs. Lenve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bowman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none?
Mrs. Lenve?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Hume?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is consent items. I need a motion to accept consent items as listed.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Riegel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Marucci. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote, please.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mrs. Hume?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve?
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict?
Yes. Next item is under old business. Everyone got a copy of the district code of conduct, and with a few changes that Mr. Bishoping alluded to. We need a motion to accept the district code of conduct for the 2021-2022 school year.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Bowman, second by Mrs. Humes.
Yes.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote, please.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Mrs. Humes?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve?
Yes.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict?
Yes. Next item is under new business, and this is what Mr. Rosansky was talking about, the resolution, September 16, 2021, the Board of Ed and the Batavia City School District authorizing and directing the transfer from the repair reserve to the general fund to pay for the emergency repair of the Batavia Middle School elevator. I need a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Marucci. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Roll. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote, please.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Humes?
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve?
Yes.
Mr. Bowman? Or Mrs. Bowman, I apologize.
Yes.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict?
Yes. Next is approval of non-resident student to attend Batavia City School District. John Kennedy, non-resident tuition charges will apply. I need a motion to accept this, approve this for a non-resident student.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Lenve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Marucci. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote.
Mrs. Lenve?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mrs. Humes?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict?
Yes. Next is a renewal of National Center for Education Research and Technology NSERT membership. I need a motion to accept this as a renewal.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Riegel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bowman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote.
Mr. Riegel?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. Humes?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict?
Yes. Next is reports, and we have Facilities Committee.
Yes, that's me.
That's you.
Tuesday, we had a Great Buildings and Grounds Committee. Some of the things we talked about were the different projects that were out there. In the past, we talked about having our contractors look at all of our facilities. Tonight, I'd like to ask the board to direct our contractors to do a complete overview of specifically the middle school, what it would cost to completely renovate that building. It's an old facility, it costs a lot every time we do small projects. In that same process of looking to see what it would cost to bring Robert Morris up to date to facilitate the student use over there.
So just to add to what Mr. Rico had shared, there is likely a significant amount of abatement, materials abatement that would be needed in that building, and it would be good before there's any kind of discussion of plans for the next capital project to get a full realization of what it would cost to completely abate that building and rehab it. As he mentioned, it's very difficult to do any work in there without disturbing any of that material. And if that's the case, then there has to be an abatement of that material in the appropriate way before that work can be done. And so, like I said, just to get an idea of the cost, an idea of what the community would want to do, knowing that cost would be important before you go into any planning of the next capital project and the long-range future of your buildings for the district.
Basically, we're going to be looking at, do we want to continue to put Band-Aids on a building, or do we want to look at doing something else? And that's what I want to talk to.
Right, eventually you're going to not be able to put Band-Aids on that building. You're going to have to do something from both an instructional standpoint as well as just a maintenance standpoint. So there's those two different components of that. And so there's been many districts that have fully gutted and rehabbed their buildings, but there's a price tag to that. And so in this district, you would want to find out, I think, in advance of making those plans, what that price tag truly would be.
Present the community, see what route the community wants to go with it.
So do we have specific contractors that we would ask to do this?
We can
Construction manager and architect.
We use ones that we already have.
Okay. So this really doesn't need a board action, it just needs an agreement that we're all supported to go to the construction manager and architect to give us an estimate of abatement first.
An estimate of overall
Yeah, cost.
abatement, fully abate, and what the reconstruction cost would be.
Is everybody in agreement with that? Mrs. Hunter, Mrs. Hume?
Yes.
Okay, you can go ahead and get that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We also have under here other. Does anyone else have any other reports that they would like to talk about? I do. We had an audit committee. It went very well. I don't understand most of what's going on, but at some point I will. And it appears to me that from what the woman from Freemax, is that what
Yes.
said we're doing very well, keeping within our ranges and our numbers and whatever, and it will be it's always an ongoing process with audit, just to let you know.
It's good.
Yep.
A presentation to the full board would be at the October board meeting of the audit report.
But
Okay.
you can't wait.
Yeah. Well, everything's going so well, it would be a short presentation. Okay. Now, if that's it, I need...
I have one thing.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah,
Chelsea, can I say something about this letter that was,
Sure.
I believe it was at the last meeting,
Mhm.
that we voted to to, what are the words, Scott? Surplus, a football sled that was not being used by any of the teams, varsity, JV, or modified. That sled went to the Batavia Bulldogs youth football program, and from myself and from John and from everybody else that's involved with the Bulldog organization, just wanted to tell you guys, thank you very much, because we finally got it on Wednesday, or on Tuesday, and
It's already broken?
it's already in use. Trust me, that night, we had the minis that were over hitting it, we had the varsity who was hitting it, and I know the varsity's hitting it again tonight, so it is gonna get well used, and just wanna thank everybody for that. It's much appreciated.
You're welcome. Good. Glad it came into use. Anything else? I need a motion to go into executive session, please. Motion made by Mrs. Bowman, second by Mrs. Hughes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none? You can call. Vote.
Mrs. Bowman,
Yes.
Mrs. Hume,
Yes.
Mr. Rowe,
Yes.
Mrs. Lembeck,
Yes.
Mr. Riegel,
Yes.
Mr. Marucci.
Yes.
Mrs. Gunn.
Yes. And we're going into executive session to have a discussion about the superintendent search. That wasn't on there, but that's what we'll be doing.
And no business is expected when you return.
No business is expected, no.